Everyone, I wanted to jump on and do a YouTube video about a book that recently I saw a lot of hype around. Now, if you know Jack Edwards, which you imagine if you're a bookish person, you've heard of him. He's also on YouTube and on TikTok and all social medias. Probably one of the biggest male TikTokers or book people out there. He did a story or a post where he talked about his reactions to White Nights by Fyodor Dostoevsky, which is what I'm going to be talking about today. He saw a tweet that said Fyodor Dostoevsky's, hard to say, book White Nights is a book that it basically said you don't know love until you've read this. Now I thought I'd do a reaction to that, and by reacting to it I went and read it. Now this is the front cover, this is the Penguin Classics edition. Essentially what they've done is, because it's so small, they've done a really kind of not cheap but simple design on the front, and then they're selling them for quite cheap so people can get them into their hands. This I think was like £3 on Amazon. It's about a woman and a man. Don't know why I'm showing you the blurb, there's no description on here. They meet at a bridge or overlooking some water, and he essentially goes up to her, sees that she's crying, she goes to walk off, she's followed by a man, so he goes to save her from the man, and then they end up in a deep conversation. He ends up admitting that he's in love with her. They want to see each other for subsequent days. They find each other really interesting, all this sort of stuff, and it ends up being a story about love. It covers a really short amount of space. There's barely any words here, yet it feels like a lot of words are written. It's a book that I think focuses on telling the story of love rather than putting in a load of dialogue, putting in a load of plot. There is no plot. There is actually no story here. The story is simply their conversation with one another. It takes place over, I think, a few nights. I'm not sure how many nights. Third night, 3 nights maybe. He falls in love with her. He tells her this. He tells her about his past. She then tells him about her past. What then unfolds is essentially a really short and really powerful telling of every emotion that you feel when you're in love, or you're falling in love, when you're in love, when your heart gets broken. He finds out that she has another man, that she was waiting on another man, that apparently he's not coming back. And then essentially he does. I've just spoiled the plot for you, but it's a very short book, and so you'd read that within. This literally took me, I think, like an hour to read. But essentially, as I said, what it does, it tells the story of their different stages through love. He starts talking about how he's falling in love, how he can't see anything else around him because it's all he can think about. He talks about the turbulence of love, the questions of it, whether he thinks they still love them back. And I think it manages to do a really, really impressive job of taking us through every stage of love that we go through as an adult, as a human being, when you're in a relationship. I think, as I said, what is most impressive is it does it in such a few amount of pages and a few amount of words. There's something to be said about Fyodor Dostoevsky's writing, that he manages to create such power and emphasis on emotions within these few words, as it were. Now, the whole book, as I said, is pretty much dialogue. There's really no kind of narrative. It's told from the first point of view, or first person point of view, of our main character. I can't even remember his name. If it is, it's quite a long Russian name, so I apologize because it's not sticking in my head. And it tells his story from his point of view. It talks of his pain, it talks of his love, it talks of his blindness, about everything else. Now, admittedly, some of it was a little bit odd. Some of it, when I first started reading it and they first started having their conversation, I thought, this is really, really odd. I don't understand this. I don't quite get what's going on here. However, it did then start to make sense. And I think what I was expecting was a proper kind of story. And I don't know why I'd expect that in 90 pages, but I was expecting a story. What I ended up getting was essentially Dostoevsky's thoughts on every kind of stage of love within 90 pages. And he wanted to cram that into these kind of conversations over the space of 3 nights that he managed to do here. Now, Dostoevsky is considered one of the greatest authors of all time. He's Russian. Sometimes I feel like his works, because they're translated, are a little trickier to understand than possibly if he was a native Englishman, though I do understand whoever's fully translated them has done their absolute best to depict what he was saying within the English language. This isn't a book you're going to easily read. It's no Colleen Hoover, it's not a Taylor Jenkins Reid, it's not those sort of authors where you're going to absolutely rush through it. Frida McFadden was in a recent video I did about how easy her books are to read. It's not going to be like that. You are going to sit here and you're going to think, I don't know what I've just read, and you will have to reread bits. But then I think what will happen is it'll start to flow a little bit easier. You'll maybe go back to a certain bit in the book that you think, I didn't understand. What did that mean? I need to understand that now. And you'll start to realize that the way he's writing is written in such a way where he manages to fit in more meaning in those fewer words and sentences than I think a lot of authors manage to fit into paragraphs. This isn't a book where he's worried about filling pages. He had absolutely no interest, I can tell, in making sure this was a 600-page epic about these two people. He just, I don't know what was going on in his life, whether he was in love, falling out of love, suffering with the pains of love. He essentially wanted to just depict all of that within this one book. And I think he's done it absolutely fantastically. So the question was, you don't know love, or not the question, but the kind of comment posed to people was, you don't know love until you read Fyodor Dostoevsky. And I wouldn't say it's changed my opinion on love. I am in love, without making anybody here cringe, with my partner. Absolutely besotted by her. I think she's absolutely fantastic. I think every single day I feel one of these emotions, whether it's the falling part, whether it's the nervous part, that sort of stuff. Less nervous these days because we're 6 years in and it's just solid, but you get the idea. But it's essentially a book that I think I could relate to in that kind of sense. I understand all the emotions that are in this book. I understand all the problems that happened here. I think anybody who's kind of, I don't know, you got to about 30 years old, you've probably experienced this. You've experienced the best parts of falling, the exciting parts at the start. You've experienced the moments where you're in it and then you start to question as to whether things are as good as you think they are. Then things start to crumble, and then things start to break, and then it's the worst thing in the world. And that's essentially what you're going to experience in this book. It is a great understanding of love. I will get that. That's probably the best way I can describe it. It's a fantastic understanding of love in so few pages. Do not go into this expecting this to be some sort of epic, some sort of fantastic, life-changing novel. But do go into this, and if you don't think you know what love is, you may then understand what love is from White Nights by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I think that's the best way I can probably say that. It's really quite an interesting book. It's one of those books, I don't know if it's a book that's going to shoot to the top of my all-time lists. I gave it a 4.25 on my blog in my review recently. So that's not 4.75, which is why I rate everything. Don't rate anything a 5 because nothing's perfect. In my review, I commented on what I've kind of spoke about here, really, in that I think it depicts love brilliantly. There's no plot, so you don't find yourself, well, I want to say you wouldn't find yourself racing to know what's happening next, but you kind of do, because you become interested in these characters. You generally feel for them. You feel for this guy that's kind of opened his kind of world to this woman who has opened her world to his, but not in same kind of strength, not with the same kind of compassion. Unfortunately, it breaks him a little bit. And the end of the book, it does cut off quite quickly. My edition does have like a little, it's called the Bobok, which is the notes of a certain person. So it says, this time I'm submitting the notes of a certain person. It is not I, it is by an altogether different person. I think nothing more in the way of an introduction is necessary. I didn't read that bit because it wasn't in the Kindle version. So I didn't read that bit, so I'm not sure if I do need to read that bit, but I don't think it's part of the book. I think it's like an addition to it. It doesn't cover the story that we've just read, these two same characters. Let me know if I do need to read that, because I didn't, but let me know. Anyway, if you are looking for a little depiction of love that's relatively cheap, then you could do a lot worse than picking up White Nights by Fyodor Dostoevsky. If you've read anything else by him, I did try starting The Idiot. One of my colleagues at work read it. Somebody referred to him as The Idiot, and he was like, what do you mean? And then they read the book and then they understood. Didn't do well with that. I got about a third of the way in. It was so hard on my brain. I was trying to listen to it and read it, and it was very complicated. So this one was a lot easier to kind of take in, because I knew it was only 90 pages. So if I was struggling with any part of it, I knew I could just kind of start that bit over again, because it wasn't going to take me long to finish the book. So that's my thoughts on White Nights by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Now, I rambled in this. I may have repeated things. This may not be the best YouTube video you've ever seen on the White Nights by Fyodor Dostoevsky. You may not have ever seen a video on this before. I imagine you have, but you may not have. This definitely won't be the best you've ever seen. But I'm new here. I've only been doing this for I've only done this for 4 or 5 videos now. I love talking about books, but articulating differently how different books are can sometimes be tricky. But so be kind. But yeah, this is White Nights by Fyodor Dostoevsky. It didn't teach me anything new about love, but it did. I do have an appreciation for how it depicts love. So if that's what you're into, if you're a romantic person, I wouldn't say it's a romantic book in any sense of the word. There are some moments in it where it's quite sweet the way they speak to each other, but I was just felt the whole time, I was a little bit like, but they've only known each other like 1 day. Why would they be speaking to each other like that? But they do. And if you take away the context of how long they've known each other, it is quite sweet in the way they speak to each other. But I didn't feel the romance. I didn't feel that kind of bubble about them. But it does a brilliant job, as I said, of depicting every stage of love, which I've said 100 times. So definitely go and have a read if you haven't already. So that's White Nights by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, even though it got a bit rambly, do drop a like, drop a comment. If you've read anything by him, if you've read any of the romance books you think are genuinely worth reading, then definitely let me know below. But other than that, thanks for watching. I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.